Alright, in this video I'm going to show you how the Linux kernel module file have some sort of predefined standard text and header, or in other word you can say the basic skeleton of the Linux kernel module file. When you try to write a Linux kernel module, these function text and headers should be as defined inside the file. Okay, so it will be a short video, but it's a precise one. This file going to contain the skeleton text for Linux kernel module, right? Okay, so without further ado, let me open up a terminal and let me spawn it. Okay, so what is the name? Linux kernel. Okay, kernel module. Let me a little bit increase the size of the font so people can see it. Linux kernel module. Okay, and more kernel module skeleton skill.c. okay, now if I get into this file, a simple stuff. Okay, the first of all we need to add some header file. Include linux/kernel.h. okay, then again include linux/init.h, and then include linux/module.h. This header files are required. Now there are some macro which will expand, but which has to be defined in this file, like module description. Okay, and inside that this file contain the required stuff for Linux kernel module. So I have written this, but your module could have much more descriptive explanation in this area, so people can understand the purpose of the module you are writing. Okay, so that has to be explicit and clear here. Okay, and then I have to write license and we have to write GPL because that is the only license allowed. Now you have to do author, and here your name. Okay, so this has to be defined on the top of the file explicitly. Okay, again I wrote some rudimentary text on module description, but again I'm reminding you, when you start writing the module, you should describe clearly and precisely what your module is supposed to be going to do with the kernel in that line, module description. Okay, now every kernel module has got a entry point and exit point. Okay, so that has to be defined clearly. Okay, so to get entered into the kernel, all you have to do, static, it has an integer value. I'm writing shorthand notation. LK means Linux kernel module init. Okay, and it has a type of void. Okay, now here you can write this: inserting the kernel module. Again, you have to write something more precise and descriptive within this function. Okay, so that will be helpful for the people to understand what you are trying to do. Written 0. Okay, now if I go here and copy this entire stuff and then paste it, because I have written an initialization for the kernel module to be get inside the kernel, so I have to define a exit stuff so the module can be exit gracefully. Okay, to do that you just have to do exit, and it should have a value of void. Okay, now you can removing the kernel module. Okay, and you don't need this written statement. All you need is a brace. Okay, now these functions are defined, right? So we have defined insert function to insert the module you are writing, and we have defined a function which will gracefully remove the module from the kernel. Okay, now you could, okay, there is another now you have to call this function, right? So there is a predefined function module init, and you have to call like this. Okay, and these are the basic skeleton of the Linux kernel module file. Now this is absolute the basic and rudimentary. This stuff should be in the module. Now you could have provide your module's logic here or here, how you want to gracefully exit, or how you want the module to be play with the kernel. That logic, if you want to decide to write something, but you have to write it here in the insert section or init section, or when some event happen, or when do you want the kernel to eject out your module, for that logic has to be go here. Okay, so you understand, right? So every module has got a init section and has a exit section. It has to have. So these are, and these macros has to be defined here. Okay, and this header file has to be there. So these are the basic skeleton of Linux kernel module. You have to write if you wanted to add some other logic related to insert, I'm reinstating again and again, this file is a bare bone and the basic requirement. On top of it, you can add more stuff according to your module you are trying to write and infuse with the kernel. Okay, so you have to be absolute explicit to get the accomplishment. You have to be clear why you are inserting the module in the kernel to achieve out what is the purpose of the module. Okay, and the exit section should be there. It should leave the kernel if some specific event occur which is triggered by your module, or you can do it some other means, but it has to have a exit section to go out of the kernel. Okay, so I hope this will give you some sort of, so once you provide your other logics in these two function and you compile it, it's a C file, right? You compile, and all you have to do, you have to run on the terminal. It will generate, once you compile this file, you can insert that module with the help of insmod. With the .ko file, the kernel module file is having an extension .ko, okay, which you can insert into the kernel by calling insmod. Okay, so let me just show you how is. So you have generated .ko file, so all you have to do to insert your module inside the running kernel, all you have to do is sudo insmod your module, whatever you have generated from the left hand side file, okay, .ko. This is how you insert your module into the kernel. Okay, insmod is the command. Okay, so to get rid of it, you can do rmmod your module this is as simple as that. To insert the module, you have to use insmod. To remove the module, you have to use rmmod. Okay, but the module has to be created out of the file from the left hand side pane. Okay, I hope this is very basic but very important thing to know the structure. Okay, there is a very elaborative and explicit page in the Linux kernel documentation section. You can easily find out, and those kernel experts have clearly stated the purpose and the thing how you could do that. So I'm showing here the absolute basic to get going. Okay, you should refer back to the actual kernel documentation for the module if you are interested on it to go deep and do better. Okay, I hope this video will give you some sort of heads up or generate some sort of interest to you to write your own module to play with the kernel you are running. Okay, so thanks for watching.